As we come together today, it is important that we do so with a willingness to learn and be open with one another. On the PowerPoint, you see our commitments to each other, which will serve as our foundation for how we will engage with one another. As we listen to the stories from our fellow Wildcats, know that it takes a lot of time, preparation, and courage to narrow down a lifetime of experiences into several minutes to share with all of you. Listen with intentionality, empathy, and to recognize that each person's story is unique to them. As you listen, we also encourage that you think about how your identities, background, and culture influence the experiences that you've had, the lessons that you've learned about the world, and your sense of belonging or not belonging. Soon, you'll have the opportunity to share your story.
Welcome to Wildcat Dialogues. My name is Jade Valdez-Gomez.
I'm Nate Williams.
I'm Jessica Ramirez.
I'm Jennifer Riley.
I am Manny Ugwebu. We are excited to have you all here. All of us hold several identities, and those identities affect how we belong at K-State. For instance, I am the youngest of 4 kids.
Hispanic.
White male.
A student with a learning disability.
First-generation student.
African, European, and American.
Woman.
Middle class.
The child of an immigrant.
Low-income family.
I am male.
Catholic.
Able-bodied.
A woman of color.
Ex-evangelical.
From a split household.
Future health provider.
Heterosexual.
A proud older sister.
PhD candidate.
Today, we'll each be sharing part of our stories with you.
These stories represent just a glimpse of our lives.
And we don't represent everyone in our various communities.
You'll see that our K-State community encompasses many lived experiences.
We are here to share our stories of finding belonging at K-State.
As a first-generation Hispanic student and the oldest child in my family, I wanted to go to college to make my parents proud. My parents are from Honduras, a country in Latin America. They did not have the opportunity to graduate high school or go to college, and yet they have always encouraged me to do my best in school. I have always been very aware of the hardships my parents have gone through to give my siblings and I a better life, and I don't want to let them down. Disappointing my parents has always been one of my biggest fears. I am a first-generation student, which means that I'm the first person in my family to go to college. First-generation students feel a large pressure to succeed. We feel like we need to go the extra mile just to be on the same playing field as our peers. At K-State, I worked hard academically and gotten involved, but I still couldn't help but compare my accomplishments to those of my peers. How could my accomplishments ever measure up to those of these other phenomenal students around me? Did I truly deserve to be at K-State? These feelings of not being good enough continued to circle through my mind. I finally gathered the courage to speak to my friends and advisors about my doubts. After talking to friends and faculty, I realized I was not the only one who felt like this. Many students place this pressure to succeed upon themselves, especially first-generation students or students with a minoritized identity. It was affirming to talk with people who felt the same way I did. It helped me see I am not alone and helped me better understand all of the identities I hold. For instance, I've come to understand that being Hispanic helps me be resilient in hard times. Yes, the pressure to succeed can be overwhelming, but perfection is not the goal. There is a place for all of us to belong at K-State. It's a place where we can discover who we want to be and how to embrace all of the identities we hold. The more I reflect on my many identities, the more comfortable I feel owning them. My race and ethnicity are more visible identities, but not all identities are visible, just like being a first-generation student. Some identities, like mental health, are less visible.
I moved from Manhattan to St. George, Kansas when I was 7 years old. When I moved there, I made a really close friend, and we did everything together, from school to sports and hanging out every weekend. He pushed me to be more adventurous, while I pushed him to follow the rules more. When we got to high school, my friends started to hang out with different groups of people and experiment with things like drugs and alcohol. I drifted apart from him, because I did not want to be associated with that at the time. What I did not know was how hard he was working just to stay alive. He had a disease that you cannot see from the outside. I thought he was doing these things because he wasn't focused and didn't care about his own future. In reality, my friend chose drugs and alcohol to escape his own reality as his condition worsened. He attempted to take his own life the summer after our sophomore year of high school and thankfully was not successful. This was a wake-up call for me and everyone close to him that he needed our love and support. Things started to look better. He was getting professional help, and he and I started to hang out more. Until one day, he was caught with a vape in our gym class and was suspended for the rest of the week. That was the last time I ever saw my friend. Later that night, September 14th, 2017, at 11 p.m., my mom woke me in tears. My friend had gone to the pasture behind his house with a gun and killed himself. He was 2 months away from turning 17. My life has been forever changed by this tragic event. For years, I blamed myself for what happened, and some days I still do. I would do anything to get my friend back, but I can't. The only thing I can do is learn from my mistakes and make a difference moving forward because of it. I now realize that we are not all dealt the same cards in life. Specifically, mental health is something I had never considered before my friend passed, and is now something I care about a lot. It is even something I have gone through my own struggles with since coming to college and being overwhelmed by anxiety at times. I work hard to take care of my own mental health and have found lots of support from CAPS, our counseling service program here at K-State. Group therapy sessions have given me the opportunity to work through my own struggles and be supported by a group of peers who listen and never judge. I encourage everyone who is struggling, whether a little or a lot, to reach out and get support today. I share this story about my friend because storytelling is a powerful way to learn about different experiences and perspectives. By intentionally listening with empathy, we can learn from the stories of others. K-State gives us many opportunities to learn more about others, and it is also a place where we can learn more deeply about ourselves.
I'm a PhD candidate and instructor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering, and I'm a transgender woman. When I transferred to K-State, I knew I needed to begin rebuilding a network and getting to know people. That became challenging when I'd started to realize I'd been suppressing a fundamental aspect of who I am. It was terrifying to realize that I am transgender, which means that the gender everyone assumed I'd have when I was born is not the same as my actual gender identity. Growing up, I'd had very little exposure to the idea of trans people, and none of it was remotely positive. I was convinced that I wouldn't be able to be an engineer as a transgender woman, knowing the hate and discrimination that transgender people face. So I did what I'd always done. I suppressed it. After transferring, I was lucky enough to become a part of the K-State's McNair Scholars Program, and it was the first time I ever felt like there was someone there to support me with the issues I faced in academia. Eventually, I worked up the nerve to tell one of the McNair staff members about my fears that being trans would prevent me from ever being successful in engineering. This person was supportive and connected me with the LGBT Resource Center. I started to learn more about the community and even became friends with someone who was a trans woman getting a master's in industrial and manufacturing systems engineering. It was amazing, and I realized that I could be me and achieve my academic goals too. So I decided to finally transition. Now, transitioning wasn't easy. I had a lot of people in my life who were not accepting. I lost friends, I lost family, and my spouse and I had to work through a lot of difficult emotions and perspectives. Despite deciding to transition, my final year in undergrad, I remained in boy mode, still presenting as the gender I was assigned at birth. I only told a few trusted people on campus about my transition. Staying in boy mode those final few weeks was difficult. I could feel the approaching freedom to be myself, and I was ready. Summer came, and I stopped pretending to be someone I wasn't. I was even offered the chance to stay at K-State and earn a PhD. There have certainly been growing pains. Too many people have asked me invasive questions about my private medical information, such as the status of my genitals, or are just plain uncomfortable with me existing around them. In general, though, the faculty and other students have been supportive of me, and I have never felt like I didn't belong in the program, even when politics made me uncertain if I belonged in the state. Since transitioning, I have found community and campus groups such as the Gender Collective, a student group for anyone who doesn't fit neatly into the cisgender box. And I found joy in mentoring other people who are coming to terms with what being trans means for their identity and future. I have grown significantly in my acceptance and understanding of myself. And soon I'll have completed a PhD in mechanical engineering and be a teaching assistant professor in the same department I was initially scared to come out in. It's important to remember that transgender people are not fundamentally different than anyone else, though we have to go through some extra steps to understand and become who we are. This can mean that we are often at odds with the dominant and overly simplified ideas of sex and gender in our society. But that is okay, because the spectrum of sex and gender are a beautiful part of the diversity of life.
I'm originally from Oxnard, California, which is just north of Los Angeles. I'm pursuing my master's degree in sociology with graduate certificates in public health and social justice education. My passions in and outside of the classroom revolve around the issue of basic needs, more specifically housing and food security. Using my education and personal experience, my goal is to serve as a bridge between impoverished, under-resourced communities and public policy. I'm often asked why I care so much about these issues, and from an outsider's perspective, I can see why. Looking at me, it's hard to see the complexities of my life, the experiences I have had, and the many identities that I hold. But food and housing insecurity are issues that I have grown to know quite well throughout my early childhood years. Growing up, both of my parents were active gang members and addicted to drugs, which meant that our means of acquiring food was never stable, and our home was often our car when we had one, and outdoor spaces and shelters when we didn't. Being removed from my parents' care, spending time in the foster care system, and ultimately being raised by my grandparents until the age of 18 made my path to higher education very unique. I received my high school diploma from a continuation high school for at-risk youth, and I didn't write my first academic paper until I began college. While I despised the idea of going to a different high school than all of my friends at the time, it was actually at my continuation high school that I was first introduced to the idea of going to college. From the moment that I stepped foot into my first college class, I knew that pursuing higher education held the potential to radically change the trajectory of my family's life. However, I still faced challenges during college. At one point, my home life was so unstable that I literally had no home to return to during the summer and holiday breaks. When one of my professors, Dr. Marianne Paiva, caught wind of the fact that I had been sleeping in my car that summer as I awaited the reopening of the dorms in the fall, she sent me an email inviting me to come and live with her and her family. Dr. Paiva and I grew incredibly close, and when it came time to figure out what I was going to do after graduating with my bachelor's from Chico State, Dr. Paiva encouraged me to apply to grad school. She knew how important it was for me to be surrounded by supportive, caring people and by an atmosphere that made everyone feel like family. Dr. Marianne Paiva encouraged me to apply to the Master's of Sociology program right here at K-State, the same department she earned her PhD from in 2016. Sometimes I have moments where I really can't seem to understand how someone like me, with the many identities that I hold and the infinite complexities that make up my life, found themselves here at Kansas State University. I'm Mexican and Black, and just walking through campus, it's evident that I don't look like many of my peers. One day, a student stopped me and excitedly said, "Jess, we're matching." For a split second, I looked at her confused before realizing she wasn't talking about our clothes. Instead, she was referring to our slick back hairstyle and large gold hoop earrings. I smiled and said to her, "It's a cultural thing. If you know, you know." She giggled and shared how grateful she felt to see someone like her on our campus. I couldn't help but get emotional thinking about her comment and how much I would have appreciated seeing more Black and brown women teaching my college courses. So while I wish I could tell you that I feel like I fit in at K-State, truthfully, I don't. I do, however, feel privileged to be a part of a community that doesn't make fitting in a prerequisite to belonging. What I've come to learn is that no matter who you are, no matter your race or ethnic background, whether you are native to Kansas or you moved here to be a part of the Wildcat family like I did, you have a culture that you belong to, where you come from, your family customs and traditions, your taste in music, or your literal taste in food. That is all part of what makes you, you.
I am originally from Imo State in Nigeria, West Africa. Moving to Overland Park, Kansas for high school in 2016 was really challenging for me in a bunch of ways. I was bullied because of my differences, from how I did my hair to my accent, to how I dressed and to my hobbies. I did my best to blend in, like trying to learn to play golf and basketball. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was trying to change everything about me in order to fit in. When I got to K-State, I felt much more comfortable to be myself. I saw that this is a campus full of people from different cultures and backgrounds, and this made me feel more accepted instead of less than. The exception has been when people ask me about my accent. Every week, I run into someone who will ask me, "Where are you from?" No, where are you really from? Well, what does that question really mean? Is it because the person asking wants to get to know me and my unique background? Or are they asking it in a way that says, "You couldn't really belong here"? Are they leading with curiosity and respect? Or are they asking it in a way that implies, "I am less intelligent," or that Manhattan isn't my home as much as it is theirs? Even if their intention is good, it sometimes comes off in a way that reminds me of all the ways I am not like those around me. It makes me feel segregated and different. Suddenly, I am back in high school, and the only thing people see about me is all the ways that I don't fit in. I don't want to be reduced to my accent, just like we all don't want to be defined or boxed in by only one of our identities. Even though my accent may be very different from yours, you and I might have something in common, like I am a K-State student, I am a son, I am a US citizen, I wasn't born in Manhattan, and I love music. We should not ignore our differences, but it is important to come at those differences from a place of openness and curiosity. What I appreciate most about being at K-State is that I am welcomed for who I am and the unique presence I bring. I am happy to call this place home and all the people here my family. I am learning every day with every interaction that fitting in requires changing who I am, whereas belonging is getting to be who I truly am and getting to be myself around others.
As a white male from a small town in Kansas, it's easy for me to feel like I fit in here at K-State. Being at a predominantly white institution means I don't have to feel out of place because of the color of my skin, and being an agriculture major means I am surrounded by mostly men in my studies. I don't have to work hard to belong here at KSU. I do face challenges, but those challenges are not because of my race, gender, sexual orientation, or socioeconomic class. This is something I never would have admitted before coming to K-State, because to me, this invalidated the hard work I had done. What so many people with privilege, like myself, fail to understand is that it does not mean we didn't work hard, focus, or dedicate our lives to what we strive for. What it does mean is that we did not have to clear hurdles that many others do. I shouldn't be ashamed of this. I cannot control who I am and where I come from. Instead, I want to work hard to be a part of creating this community to be welcoming for all. Conversations around difference and identities used to make me feel uncomfortable, but now I know that these conversations with family, friends, roommates, faculty, and more help us gain perspectives into experiences we might have been ignorant to, and to better understand the barriers many in our community still face. When we say K-State family, we have to work hard to be sure everyone can belong.
Wildcat Dialogues is just the start of a conversation between you and your fellow Wildcats.
As you move into your small groups, think about the identities you hold and how they affect how you belong at K-State.
I think we all have struggled with feeling like we belong at some point in our lives. Recognizing how our identities affect our sense of belonging helps us work towards creating a community where we all belong and not just fit in.
One of the best pieces of advice I have ever heard came from my mentor, Jaime Mendez III, a K-State alum and former football player, who said, "Never apologize for who you are and how you were raised. Own it. Because if you can't understand where you come from, you will never be able to understand where others come from."
Sharing our stories and listening to others is a powerful way to learn about different experiences and perspectives.
Our big ask for you, members of the Kansas State community, is if you were telling a story about K-State, one where we created a community of belonging for all, what would you envision? What would our campus be like, look like, or act like? because it's all of our campus and it's all of our responsibility.
You've heard my story,
My story.
My story.
My story.
And my story.
now it's time to explore your story.
Thank you to our peers for sharing your stories with us. As most of them are here this evening, can we give them another huge round of applause? We are beyond grateful for your willingness, courage, and vulnerability as you shared the ways in which your identities have influenced your sense of belonging here at K-State. We hope all of you guys will be inspired to share your story later on this evening during our small group time. Next, let's take some time to reflect on our own stories by exploring our social identities.
On your handout, you will see an illustration called an identity wheel. I'll give you a second to grab it. This is a tool to help us understand the various parts of ourselves, dimensions that represent how we see ourselves and others. They are considered social because they are influenced by and shaped by our social context. For example, our relationships, culture, or even geographical location influence how we think about each of these dimensions. Some of these identities are more visible, such as race, gender, expression, and physical attributes, and others are not as easily seen, such as socioeconomic status, mental health, religion, or spirituality, and many others. Some of our identities are inherited, and some of them we have more influence over. For me, my age, my family's socioeconomic status, and race are all things that I did not choose, but they are more like the cards I was dealt, for better or worse. Other identities I hold, whether it's my relationship status, my educational status, or religious beliefs, I played more of an active role in shaping. I also understand that growing up middle class influenced my ability to get support for my mental health and the opportunities I have had in terms of a college education. You will also notice that there are 2 blank spaces on your identity wheel. You can fill these in with any identities that are at the core of who you are. So for instance, and I'm sure for some of you, I would add my political identity in one of these spaces because I've realized how many of my other identities intersect and influence my political identity. It has been a piece of my K-State experience and has brought super productive discussion and learning, but has also caused some feelings of not belonging in some spaces. Take a few minutes to write out words that further describe how you see yourself within those dimensions. You'll be using this later in your small group dialogue. We're going to give you about 2 minutes.
Okay, everyone. We'll get back to that sheet a little later on this evening as well. So now that we have looked through and thought about our identities, let's reflect on how they influence our belonging here at K-State. With the person next to you, talk about which identities you are most aware of and or think about most often. We do recognize there are going to be a ton of little conversations right now, but just take a few moments to the person to your left, person to your right, and reflect on that identity wheel for us. All right, everyone. That was fun. Thank you all for getting our conversation started. So, why do we start here? Because our identities are part of what influences our sense of belonging. As we learn from one another, we begin to discover our role and our shared story as part of the larger K-State family. And Wildcat Dialogues is a place where we can engage in those courageous conversations to learn about ourselves and one another.
Well, excuse me, good evening again. I'm Corey Williamson with the K-State Student Union. And with me is Kareem Moncaño Michelle with the Staley School of Leadership. So for the next part of our event, we will move into small groups. So for you to engage in your own opportunity to tell your story. So before we move on, we're going to provide you a few instructions, and I'm going to ask Karina to come provide those for you.
Okay, how's everybody feeling? Pretty good, awesome. Great, so I'm gonna start giving the instructions. Everybody's gonna wanna start moving and grabbing things, but let's just take a second, let me get through it, and then we can start moving. That way we can all hear each other. Okay, so whenever we start getting up and moving around, the first thing you're gonna do is take your handout, pen, and anything else you brought with you today, because you won't be coming back in here. We'll dismiss the groups by rows. So we'll start on this side of the room and we'll kind of get through it all so that everybody knows where they're going. Your small group facilitator should be seated towards the end of your row. If you're a facilitator, please stand up, wave your hand up, and if you have the group number at the end of the chair, you see the group number? Yeah, we can hold those up. Make sure you are sitting in the group. And if you're not, it's okay. You know, we want to get most of it looking right. Great. Good job. Awesome. All right. So thank you, facilitators. After small group dialogue at 8:30, we'll invite you to join us on the first floor outside of Rodina's, where the Union Program Council is hosting a social with cookies, soda, and water, and you can continue to dialogue after we finish at 8:30 here. So now we're gonna start dismissing. If you have any questions, we can answer those for you. Stay seated until I call your group number, okay? So groups 1 and 2, you'll stay here in the ballroom. 3 through 7, you can follow your facilitator to your small group location. Good job, Jake. All right, groups 8 through 12, you can stand and head out. Groups 13 through 18, you can stand and find your way out. Follow your group facilitator. Okay. 19 to 23. '24 through 29, you'll stay here. 30 through 36. Caught you there, huh? You guys were about to get up. I saw you. If you get lost, your group location's on your name tag. 37 through 45. And then our last groups, you guys can make your way out.